In a handsome flat on Upper William Street, in the wet darkness of a September's half-midnight, Cathal was giggling because he no longer cleaned his belly button. A month or so earlier, Cathal's alarm woke him. As he emerged from his dreams, he stretched and ran his hand along his middle, pausing at his belly button. As strange as this may sound, Cathal was fairly proud of his belly button and thought it one of his most attractive features. He gave his middle a satisfied pat and eased himself out of bed. When he dressed for work, he paused for a minute or two to admire it. He turned this way and that as he normally did, before carefully buttoning up and tucking in his shirt. While walking to his job at Telegraphic Design, Cathal spotted something unusual on the path. It was a beautiful, ornately carved wooden button, about 1 centimetre in diameter. He picked it up between thumb and forefinger and let the pad of his thumb glide across the button's face. It had the smooth texture of wood that had taken on the oils from many years of skin rubbing across its surface. Cathal felt right away that he wanted to keep the button and slipped it straight into his pocket. That day at work, Cathal found that he couldn't stop thinking about the button. He slipped it surreptitiously out of his pocket, gazed at it, and wondered how something could appear to be hand-carved and yet have the extraordinary, almost artificial-looking precision that the button possessed. By midday, he became completely taken by the notion that the button was the perfect size, the precise diameter. It seemed as though it would fit very comfortably inside his belly button. He tried to shake off the thought and focus on his work. By the end of the day, he could do little more than stare at the clock, waiting for his shift to end so he could satisfy his strange urge. When 5 o'clock came, he ran to the supply closet and closed himself inside. He unbuttoned his shirt near his navel, took the wooden button out of his trouser pocket, and pressed it into his belly button. He was absolutely right. It was a perfect fit. The smooth wooden button felt wonderful and snug, like it belonged there. Cathal thought that it might even settle just a tiny bit deeper, so it could stay in place when he walked home. To try and seat it firmly, he gave it a single, strong tap. To his great surprise, it vanished. His belly button was suddenly empty. But it couldn't be possible that it had vanished. Things like that don't actually happen. It had been held tight within his belly button. There was no way for it to escape past his fingertip. Or could it have? Cathal searched the floor of the closet and found nothing. There was, however, a crack in the baseboard on the other side of the tiny room. The crack was deep and wide enough that the wooden button could have slid inside if it had rolled across the floor and into the gap on its edge. The depth and darkness of the crack made it impossible to see within, so he couldn't confirm if this was the case. Cathal made up his mind that this is what had happened, decided to leave it go, and then headed home for the night. A few weeks passed, and Cathal no longer wondered what happened to the wooden button. He got up in the morning, put the kettle on, and started his daily routine. While admiring his navel's reflection, he noticed that it suddenly felt itchy. He gave it a quick scratch, then a longer one, then a deeper one. As he wiggled the edge of his nail deeper into his belly button, he felt a fuzzy lump about the size of a pea. He started to pull it out and had a sensation in his belly like pulling a hair out of one's mouth. When the well of his navel ran dry, he had a clump of lint that filled the palm of his hand entirely. Cathal was unnerved. His initial reaction to the mass of lint was revulsion, and yet he couldn't bring himself to put it in the bin. He stayed at home, trying his best to not think about what happened. Cathal sat at his breakfast table, the ball of lint on the tabletop across from him. As the moments and hours passed, he couldn't help but feel a strange fascination with the fuzzy mass. Inexplicably, though he didn't touch it, he felt like it was getting heavier, like it was a bowling ball on a taut sheet, and he, a marble, starting to slowly descend towards it. Cathal started to feel a connection to the mass of lint, and gradually found it to be beautiful. He cleaned out an old jar, placed the lint inside, and screwed the lid shut. Things started to get strange after that. Each night, Cathal probed the depths for ever larger pieces of lint, adding more to his collection. He got little sleep. He ate even less. He increasingly stayed inside and stopped having friends about. When they rang to check on him, Cathal insisted that he was fine, that he was just engrossed in a new hobby. Sometimes, during his short hours of sleep, he would wake up in the middle of the night, screaming in pain as his belly button seemed to twist and turn on its own. The lint in his collection of jars started to move and squirm in rhythm to the throb in his belly. He started whispering to the lint, pleading with it to stop the pain. To his amazement, it whispered back, "I can't dream on my own. Tell me of your dreams, and I'll settle right down." When he spoke his dreams to the lint, it started to take on the shapes of his imaginings. He breathed aspirations to the lint, what he wished to see, what he'd already seen but wished to remember. Act out a story of pirates and love in the style of an 80s adventures film, and the lint would oblige in soft, muted pantomime. Create an impressionist picture of a dog playing fetch, and the lint would arrange itself into a stunning monochrome still image. Cathal quit his job, stayed in all the time, and started to wonder if this fascination might be a problem. Not to worry, he reassured himself. I'll just give it up for Lent. The collections of fluff seemed to be able to create anything. The only limitation was the amount of available material. Cathal soon spent most of his waking hours pulling a steady rope of lint from his middle and giggling with delight at the scenes and images enacted and created for him. Soon, lint piled on his floor, the chairs, the counters. It then filled up the presses, the windows. Bit by bit, it crept up all the way to the ceiling, enclosing him in its soft, dreamy, warm world. He didn't mind. He swam his way around his flat between his bed, the kitchen, the living room. He dug out little caverns within the lint to create spaces for his shows to go on. Weeks had passed since Cathal had been seen by any of his neighbours. As none of his friends or family had heard from him or could reach him, the Gardaí were called in to investigate. When they forced the door of his flat, behind it was an impassable wall of lint. One Garda swore that when they first opened the door, she heard a muffled voice either giggle or sob for a moment. Even more Gardaí were called in, and together they bagged and removed the fluff so they could search for Cathal. When all the lint was cleared from the flat, it was entirely empty. There was no sign of Cathal or any of his belongings. The only object that remained was a beautiful hand-carved wooden button in the centre of the living room floor.